And I remember sitting there and I was like, huh, okay, well, I'm a lawyer and I know the immigration related regulations pretty well. I've now seen what it takes to build a product based on those regulations. I have both sides of the coin. This idea just automatically dusted itself off the top of my head, and it gave me the confidence to start. And I'll never forget, you kind of look at every step along the way of your career and think like, oh, was that a step back? Was that a step sideways? And that one moment was, if anything, the biggest, moment of that whole job. So, from there, I ended up starting to work on what eventually became Laborless, which is a tech company that automates H-1B compliance.
Welcome to Backstage Pass with the HR Rockstar, the show that pulls back the curtain and cranks up the volume on the most pressing HR topics, from talent strategies and workplace culture to career pivots and leadership. Because in today's world, HR isn't just behind the scenes, it's center stage. I'm your host, Jay Arnold, and in the world of HR and talent, there are times we recognize top performers within the workplace, sometimes referred to as rock stars. This podcast combines my love of HR as my career with my experience of 10 plus years performing shows around Michigan and the Midwest in my rock band, chasing the dream of being an actual rock star. Join me as I sit down with rock stars in their fields to have fun, insightful conversations that keep the human in human resources. Together we'll disrupt, innovate, and amplify the future of work. So grab your pass, turn it up, and let's make some noise. Today on the show, I'm joined by Roman Zelichenko, an immigration attorney turned tech founder and CEO of Laborless, a digital platform modernizing compliance for the H-1B, H-1B1, and E-3 visa programs. Laborless is helping law firms and HR teams navigate the often complex regulatory requirements with ease and efficiency. In our conversation, Roman shares his journey from practicing immigration law to launching a startup and how his platform is creating real impact by streamlining processes and delivering value to both legal and HR teams. Hi, Roman, and welcome to the show. I'm so glad that we're able to connect. We followed each other on LinkedIn for a number of years now, and what you're doing in the immigration and tech space really is remarkable. Why don't we just kind of jump right in and give us a little bit of background of who you are and honestly what it is you do for those that don't know.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Shay, for having me. Really appreciate it. And congrats on the podcast. It's a great show, and I'm excited for you. I love listening to podcasts, and I think more shows and more information in the HR and immigration space is crucial. So I love it. And your background, by the way, for anybody who's watching on video, is epic. You got your guitar, you got your albums back there. Okay, so my name is Roman Zelichenko. I am a former U.S. immigration lawyer. Worked at a firm for a number of years. Well, I guess two, really. So just a couple of years, but worked on a high volume H-1B team. So I supported tech companies, large and small, and a bunch of other types of employers, and helped them with their H-1B visa process. I mean, that was really mostly what I did. Dabbled with a couple other visa types, but that was really it. I love the work. I love being a lawyer. I loved supporting my clients. But I think I always had this sort of, I don't know, I always thought about the law firm's business more than I did sort of the work that I did. Obviously at work, I was, trying to be the best lawyer I could. But outside of work, I remember I was always reading books about kind of business development and technology and startups. And I was just really fascinated by marketing and business building. And I had a lot of ideas even for, marketing the law firm. And I think over time, I kind of realized that that's probably where my passion is, maybe, or maybe that, so that's something that's more aligned with my personality, sort of trying to start a business. At the same time, but separately, as an H-1B visa attorney, I also was helping my clients with their labor condition application process, right? So for the HR folks who are listening who do immigration, they know that this is a compliance part of the H-1B visa process. And, as a lawyer, I had to help them with like filing this form with the Department of Labor and creating what's called a notice, of posting for them and what's called a public access folder, a public access file, and sort of helping them with that whole compliance process. I think I had been reading enough like tech books and following up tech companies that this whole process that I was, kind of working on and assisting my clients with, it felt so outdated and ripe for disruption, quote unquote. And, I thought, I'm like, okay, there must be a better way to do this, which is apparently what every business founder, I guess, says. And yeah, I mean, I kind of went on a circuitous journey after that. I left the legal practice after, about 2 years. I worked in tech for a handful, about 3 years, in sort of an internal consulting role. They liked the fact that I was a lawyer and that I was interested in tech. So I kind of worked as like an internal McKinsey, if you will. So my team kind of went around different areas of this large organization and helped them with, streamlining and technology and all that stuff. And it was awesome because I got to see different aspects of a large company and how it works, specifically how companies go from, one type of process to enhancing it with technology or whatever. And the thing that stuck out to me, and I always had this idea in the back of my mind. I was actually helping some random immigration tech startup that doesn't exist anymore. I was like consulting with them on the side. Like I stayed tethered to immigration, and I had this thought of like, okay, the H-1B compliance, this LCA process really should be better. But I was like, I never started a business. I mean, who am I, right, to build something? And I remember this meeting at this company, this tech company I was at, where so my team was in the meeting because we were like this internal consulting team. And we were there with lawyers in Europe who were advising this group of people in the meeting on some regulations that just came down, some like financial regulations. The reason was that these financial regulations would have an impact on the technology product that this company, one of the products. And so in this meeting were these tech people and product people on the one side, and on the other side were these lawyers. And the whole meeting was like, okay, lawyers, can you please tell us, have you read the regulations yet? And if so, can you describe them to us so we have an understanding of how we can turn this into a new feature or like update our technology to be in compliance with these new updated regulations? And I remember sitting there and I was like, huh, okay, well, I'm a lawyer and I know the immigration related regulations pretty well. I've now seen what it takes to build a product based on those regulations. Like I have both sides of the coin. I really just, and then sort of this idea just automatically dusted itself off the top of my head, and it gave me the confidence to start. And I'll never forget, you kind of look at every step along the way of your career and think like, oh, was that a step back? Was that a step sideways? And that one moment was, if anything, the biggest, moment of that whole job. So, from there, I kind of just launched. I mean, there have been many steps along the way, but I ended up starting to work on what eventually became Laborless, which is a tech company that automates H-1B compliance.
That's a fascinating story because one thing I wanted, maybe we can back up just a little bit, is,
Of course.
for the HR professionals and even those that are just listening, that are, whether they're foreign nationals on a visa, they have an interest in this topic, they're hiring managers or they're running teams and they know they have someone on a visa on their team at some point, or they might at some day. What visas even require an LCA? And maybe we should just break it down at the basic level, what an LCA is and what visas require it, because not all visas require it.
Right. Okay, great. So the LCA, the labor condition application, basically, I mean, is a form that attests to the U.S. government that you're paying this foreign national, fair wages, and that like you're hiring them under normal circumstances. There's no like lockdown or something, or lockout rather, or other issues with the company. The idea is that you're just being transparent. You're hiring a foreign national into America. And so, rightly so, the government says, look, we need some data on where they're going to be working, how much they're going to be getting paid, right? Because we need to make sure that they're getting paid fair wages and they're not, competing with the US workforce. Now, this is different from when you're hiring somebody permanently, but that's the concept of this form. There is also a notice process where, yes, you file this with the government, you've given them the correct data points about salary, location, et cetera, of this foreign worker, but you also need to notify your employees, hey, we're hiring a foreign national. And so the regulations from the Department of Labor require employers to effectively provide notice to their employees that you're hiring this foreign national. So it's typically, just associated with the H-1B visa, which is, a really common high, skilled work visa, but there is the H-1B1 as well, which is kind of like a small subset of the H-1B only for Singapore and Chile. And, there's some small allocation of visas there. And the E3, which is for Australians, Irish, I think, if I remember correctly. I forgot who's on the E3 visa now.
I thought it was just Australians, but if something might have changed in the last year or two,
It is just
I'm not sure.
Australians. Yeah, it is just Australians. I don't know why. Maybe there was some discussion about. Anyways, yeah. So E3 for just Australians, and the idea there is similar, right? You're hiring. It's the same. It's the same requirements from a visa standpoint. It's just that this one is per an agreement with Australia. So the H-1B standard, H-1B1 and E3 visas all require an accompanying labor condition application to the Department of Labor, and then this notice process, right? And this folder you have to hold on to, this public access file, which has this form that you're sharing with your employees. It has some basic data about the job opportunity and the salary and all that. And the concept here is you have to hold on to this folder for a certain period of time. And if someone comes in to from the could be off the street, could be an officer, a government officer, and they request review of this folder just to make sure, right? Maybe there's an audit, maybe somebody called in and said, hey, got some people coming in who are foreign nationals and we think they're being underpaid. I mean, the public or workers have the right to do that. And so this folder is a way for you to basically keep track of all these things and show them when needed. This process is, again, a requirement for the H-1B, H-1B1E application process, this compliance piece. And yeah, it was always kind of done by hand, lots of paperwork printed and posted. I mean, as an immigration professional in-house yourself. So yeah, so for those who are on the HR side of things, and if you don't handle H-1Bs, it's actually really interesting. I think I've seen a lot of HR career folks go from handling kind of maybe broader or different HR aspects and dabble in immigration just because it's so fascinating. And they've always really liked it. So I encourage anybody who's listening, if you really like the HR space, you haven't worked in immigration, or maybe you don't know what the H-1B is, give it a shot.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of misconceptions around the visa too. And my first guest was an immigration attorney that I'd worked with closely over the years. And one of the questions I asked her was, what's one thing you wish more people understood about immigration law but rarely do?
Whoa.
I thought she had a fantastic response because I tend to agree with her response very much. Is she said, it's one of those topics that people are so passionate about but know nothing about. And especially when it comes to employment-based visas like the H-1B, because there's so many misconceptions. And yes, we know some companies have maybe done things that maybe are out of compliance, and there have been cases where those companies have gotten in trouble, of course. But there's a perception like, oh, there's a software engineer, and I like to always use a nice round number, and software engineer makes $100,000, but we're going to pay someone from another country $30,000 to do the same job. And you and I know that's just not true. That is way out of compliance. There's prevailing wages levels 1 through 4. And the H-1B, when you do the LCA, it really is a two-pronged test with the Department of Labor and USCIS, or Immigration Services, compared to other visas where it's just through USCIS or processing at the U.S. Embassy abroad or a port of entry for Canadians, like on a TN1. So there's, again, a lot of misconceptions. I've seen spot checks where an immigration offer has showed up to verify someone on an H-1B is paying a fair wage. They want to see all the filings. They want to look at pay slips to make sure what was filed is against what their payroll says. So it truly is one of those things where if you just spend a little bit of time learning, whether you're understanding H-1Bs or not, go, okay, I get it, or I understand a little bit more now. But as far as, LCAs, one of the things that I have seen challenges with is there's something called a third-party work site. And this could be a company. I'm here in Detroit, so let's just think of it, the auto industry. Is you might have like an automotive supplier and someone on an H-1B visa, and they're an engineer, and they work on site occasionally at one of the big three. They're there doing testing, they're working with the teams at that company, but they are an employee of the supplier. Their paycheck is from the supplier. They don't have a paycheck from an OEM. And we have to post that LCA at the third-party work site, even though the supplier is paying their salary in terms of employment. So I have reached out before trying to find, an immigration professional at a large company saying, hey, could you post this for me? Because they know what has to be done. And I've had hiring managers, tell me, or, their line manager that this person reports to on site is saying, I'm not going to post this. Why can't a U.S. worker do this job? And I think that's where there's a big misconception is this isn't a job posting. This is a notice that this person's already in the role and they might be renewing their H-1B. They might be going into a similar role. And that's where there's a big misconception. And that's where, when I learned what you do, when you pivoted to your company of Laborless and the electronic version of this, I was like, this is a game changer because you're hitting compliance pieces. User experience seems to be great, and it's a win-win across the board. So why don't we dive into what is Laborless? How did you come up with it? And what does it do?
Yeah, it's a great question. And for anybody who is listening, and if this goes over your head a little bit, if you don't know immigration, please reach out to me on LinkedIn or anywhere, I'm always happy to chat about it. So yeah, I mean, like you said, this third-party worksite posting piece is an issue. But the idea is that, okay, you're the manufacturer, like you said, and you're placing an employee on site. If the duration of the time on site is sufficient for an LCA notice, that third party, this large, big three or whatever company, they have to notify their employees too that they're going to have a foreign national on site working. And in that notice, it has to has to list the job title, the location where they're working, the salary, etc. Now, this is not their H-1B employee, right? To your point, this is the H-1B employee of the parts manufacturer, but because they're working on site at this big three car company, they have to do this posting as well. A lot of times, of course, the parts manufacturer who actually hired that H-1B worker, they're compliant. They're posting this LCA internally at their office or however they want to do it. But then they have to call. I mean, I'm sort of reiterating what you're saying, but I'm trying to, create a little narrative around it. Then they have to call this company and say, hey, we're sending our worker to you to help with whatever this project needs. They're going to be on site for X amount of time. This person, though, happens to be an H-1B worker. And so as part of having them on site, can you please comply with this Department of Labor regulation, which says, hey, can you please post this piece of paper for 10 or more days? Let us know that you've posted, take it down after a certain period of time, etc. As you can imagine, these big three or whatever company you're placing your H-1B worker at, they're like, this isn't why I don't want to do this. I don't have any, this is your employee. Why am I responsible for this? Right. Or if they actually know what they're doing, like you said, if there is an immigration person in the house, I mean, there are a million different reasons. They're not on the hook. If they don't do this, if they completely just reject you or they just ignore your email or your correspondence, nothing will happen to them legally speaking. And by the way, actually, during the first Trump administration, he actually tried to change that to say, if you do want to place an H-1B worker at a third-party worksite, they were introducing more kind of onerous requirements on that third-party worksite. It didn't come to fruition, but so the idea though is that now that big three might say, I don't want to deal with this, not my responsibility. So now you as the manufacturer or whoever is hiring that H-1B worker need to make a choice. Do you keep that client, that big three, and continue to send your H-1B worker there on site to do project, whatever, but knowing that they're not going to post your LCA notice, sort of take on that compliance risk, in case the Department of Labor comes and checks or somebody internally checks and turns out you didn't do the posting, you're out of compliance. And best case scenario, you get a small slap on the wrist from the Department of Labor. Worst case scenario, you can get up to $5,000 fine per violation, which is really high. Right. So you have to choose. Do I just keep this client and take the risk? Or do I tell the client, hey, if this big three company, if you're not going to post this notice, which is required by the law, we are terminating this contract. You're not getting this H-1B, we're not going to do the project, which maybe some companies do if they want to be 100%. Some companies don't. Anyway, it's a big challenge, right? And this continues to be the case. So the idea behind Laborless is that whereas typically, as you said, you have to print this notice and put it in your office and it's supposed to notify your employees. If you have this third party client, you have to send them this notice so that they print it and post it internally to notify their employees of this H-1B worker and some basic data around their job. Laborless is a tool, it's a SaaS platform that enables companies to basically post electronically. Imagine job postings like, I don't even know how many years ago. Let's just say 50. I'm going to ballpark it. 50. So forget about newspapers. Newspapers are great. There's always like the job ad section, but you used to have job openings in, let's say in a small town, there's like a town hall and you could go in and look at the court bulletin, right? And see who's posted a piece of paper that says wanted. I mean, heck, you see that outside of stores sometimes, right? Wanted, cashier, like that's technically a job posting, right? So this existed for all different types of industries where you would go to some place and you would see job postings, job openings posted somewhere or other job related information. Now that exists on Indeed, that exists on LinkedIn, that exists on monster.com. These are web portals where you can skim through and see what, who's hiring, etc. The LCA requirement, this posting requirement, functionally is kind of the same, right? It's information that is meant to be shared with the public, and it is shared right now as a piece of paper, printed and posted somewhere, but it can be done electronically. The government has said electronic is okay, but what company is going to go and build a software, like build a tool to do this electronically, or what law firm is going to go and build a tool just for this? Because this tool didn't exist before. So, that was the idea behind Laborless. Let's build a tool that enables these employers that are hiring H-1B workers to post this notice in what looks kind of like a job posting portal, but is specifically tailored to this LCA compliance aspect. It's done electronically. It can be sufficient for third-party work sites as well, so they don't need to print and post anything anymore. The company that's actually doing the hiring can just share this electronic bulletin, if you will, with this third-party work site and basically get rid of all of the rigmarole of printing and posting paperwork. It's a super niche aspect of the H-1B process. And, again, as a lawyer, I was using tools to collect data for the H-1B, to draft documents, to, put documents together, to, collect evidence. But then when it came time for this LCA process, I was going off the computer, or I guess I should say off the platform, and then going to a manual email that I had to send to the client. Sometimes we sent documents by hand, and we, by physical mail, and then we had the client actually print and post stuff. And I was like, why can't this be digital? Oh, and so yeah, that's the idea behind the product. It helps kind of automate this compliance process, especially with the third-party work sites, which, as you said, can be a bit of a headache.
So many things in our world are digital, even pre-COVID, when everything really went digital. And this is one area I know that has struggled with technology, just immigration in general. And that's why when I saw your platform, we follow each other on LinkedIn. I'm always cheering you on, whether it's different webinars or podcasts you're on. And because I think it's right for disruption, like you said. It makes things more efficient for lawyers, HR teams, foreign nationals on the visa, third-party work sites, the employer of record. I mean, everything, it's a win across the board. I'm not going to jump too deep into your business model, but I'm sure your rates are competitive for those that want to use it. And it just makes it that much easier. Like you're sending an email versus a letter.
Right.
Through the post office. But the stakes are even higher on this versus a letter to a distant relative you haven't talked to in a while for, the price of a stamp.
I'll add to this too that we have actually a majority of our clients, and when I say that, I mean just 50%, 51% or more, are actually law firms. So we have a number of HR folks at companies that use our software directly, but sometimes there are companies where, they have an in-house HR team, of course. They might even have an in-house immigration or mobility person handling, foreign national population of a couple of hundred people, maybe even a bit more, but the team is small. Right. And the last thing the team wants to do, understandably, is, okay, sure, they're handling this LCA posting process, kind of like what you did when you have been handling H-1Bs in the past, but they're paying a law firm to do their work, right, for them. They're filing the H-1B, they're putting together the application. Most of the time, they're also interfacing with the beneficiary, the person who's going to be hired. So by doing this electronically, actually, Laborless allows the law firm to handle this compliance process on behalf of the client. This is impossible physically, unless you, the law firm, get in your car, get on the train, go to your client's office with these posting notices and ask your client, hey, where do you usually put up your LCAs? On the second floor and the fifth floor in the pantry there. Great. And then you take the elevator to the second floor and you staple it. You take the elevator to the fifth floor, you staple it. And then you go back down, get back in your car and drive back to your office. Okay. No lawyer is going to do that. I mean, it's not going to happen. And that's just because no company is going to pay, an attorney X amount of hundreds of dollars an hour to do this. It's silly. So the law firm now with Laborless can actually do this LCA compliance process for the client because it's done electronically. I, the attorney, don't need to send you, Jay, the HR person, the in-house immigration person, this notice to print and post, etc. I log onto the platform and I do it myself. And so I think that's been super interesting. When we first started, I thought, oh, companies will love this because they're the ones that I'm sending emails to print and post, and now they don't have to do that. Turns out lawyers love it even more because they like to go to their clients or a prospective client and say, hey, you know how your law firm right now is forcing you to print stuff and post stuff and get back to them via email. And if you forget, they're annoying and they're always following up, et cetera, et cetera. Guess what? My law firm has this software and I just handle the whole thing for you. You don't have to worry about it at all. So that's been really interesting, right? And as an immigration lawyer, I understand that. So it's been cool to watch that client base, if you will, grow. But certainly HR, global mobility folks use us as well, who are in-house at a variety of companies.
Yeah, and that was actually one of my questions. My follow-up questions is, What has the response been from the legal community and HR community? And it seems that it's been overwhelming successful.
Well, that's what I share, right? As you can imagine, I do try to share, the failures and the challenges too. But I'll tell you, I mean, look, when I first started and I started talking to lawyers, in theory, they said, "Oh, I'd love for this whole compliance process to be automated." I talked to mobility folks; they'd say the same thing. When we finally built Laborless and started to pitch it to people and do demos, especially the lawyers, they would say, I don't know, this doesn't exist right now. There's got to be a reason. It's probably illegal. Or is this in compliance with the law? I don't know. Or our process, none of our clients are asking for this, and our process has been fine. I can theoretically see where there's value here because, like you said, you're going from letters to emails, but I don't want to spend the time to learn this new software. Other people said, and to your point, our rates are very competitive and people just don't want to spend anything. It's not that they can't afford this. They're making, really good money as a law firm, but they don't have a growth mindset, if you will, as law firms, to say I should invest in more technology and more efficiency because it will make my firm better. And interestingly, our first clients ever were companies who were dealing with their own H-1Bs, were dealing with their own LCAs, by the hundreds per year, and they have budget, right? They have a technology budget, they have a operations budget, whatever you want to call it. And this is when you are charging too little, is when you give them your quote and you're so nervous. What if they say no? And like 10 seconds of, yep, let's go, let's sign it. No negotiation. You're like, okay, I think I'm underpricing, based on the market. But that's fine. It's a learning opportunity. But yeah, certainly there was certainly a ton of pushback in the beginning. And my thought process, this is why, I do so much on LinkedIn, why I have a podcast, why I create content. I had to take a step back and say, okay, the product I think is great. I thought it would speak for itself, but apparently that's not how things go. Now I know that's never how things go. But when you're a first time business founder, you're naive. So I said, okay, what is the pushback based on? And I found that a lot of it was two things. Number one, lack of knowledge about the fact that this can be automated, right? And number two, for those who do know that it can be automated, the lack of understanding what the value might actually be for them, right? What does this actually look like for you? And so I spent a lot of time creating content. Number one, reminding people that this is allowed. The Department of Labor encourages, digitization of this compliance process. It's not illegal. It's in the regs, et cetera. And then number two, of course, I spent a lot of time talking about, okay, here are the benefits, efficiency, greater compliance, greater transparency. As a law firm, you could use it as a business development tool, et cetera. So it's really interesting. I learned that, as a company owner, especially if you are, I guess, building something that's, I don't want to say ahead of its time, but maybe just a little too early. Because by the way, when COVID hit and everyone worked remotely, people who previously were like poo-pooing the idea suddenly came back, kind of like, the partner that rejected you when you wanted to go on a date. They're like, hey, so like, what's going on? Are you still single? I want many clients. The more clients, the better. But certainly it took a long time for, outside of something like COVID, to educate people on content and webinars and articles and trying to speak in front of folks and really just give them education. Because I think once the idea sunk into their head, they were like, okay, let me give this a shot, and then obviously, well, not obviously, but I'm proud to say that the product is really good. So once people start using it, the attrition rate is close to zero.
Yeah, I've played around with it. Obviously, I've not been a client of yours or anything. The fact that if I was, running a team like that and I could partner with you, do everything digitized from the LCAs for the three main visa types we discussed. And also, I believe there's a public access file option within the platform. That's huge. And obviously, I would have access to it if I was running a team. My team would have access to it. Maybe the director of HR that wants to get it, maybe to spot check the public access files is, Jay, I want to work with you and Laborless to make sure that we're in compliance from an HR point of view. What do I need to know? Do a demo. Here's your username and password. You go in, take a look, anything you want to, and there's a team there that can answer questions on, on the software on top of what's required in the public access file that my team would know. And if there's anything we could do, and it just seems like digitization, being digital going forward, is a no-brainer. It might take, whether it's an administration, acts of Congress, government trying to play catch up with technology and the market, all the above, right?
Yeah.
It's one of those things where it's bound to happen. And I think you're at the forefront, and so partnering with law firms and again, HR teams that, within companies, it seems like a win-win situation. Has there been any like cool success stories or feedback you've gotten like from users like on HR teams that said, Roman, this is fantastic, or some feedback you made a tweak or two to make it even better?
Yeah, I mean, look, from a product standpoint, I'm always at the end of all my emails, like when I'm done, debugging something or answering questions, I always say, if you ever have any other questions or ideas, like a wish list, could be crazy. Like, tell me you want something to fly, whatever. Tell me everything, and then we can decide sort of what's possible, when it's possible. So I always ask for feedback. The one thing that sticks out, I mean, I'm really happy to say that our clients are happy, et cetera. I don't want to spend, I don't want to pitch my business on your podcast. I want this to be informative, but I will say emotionally, the thing that I remember the most, and maybe this was just the first time it happened, I was talking to one of the paralegals at a pretty big firm that uses Laborless, and I forgot what the context was. I was probably kind of answering some questions or something, and then this paralegal told me, she said, "Oh, I really love Laborless, and we really love it at our and whenever not all of the firm's clients were using it yet, because a law firm has to sort of client has to agree effectively usually, and this firm has hundreds of clients, and so they started with the bigger ones and then sort of are selling it through to other clients as well. So this paralegal said, we love it so much that when we have a new client and they come on board with Laborless because they're a new client to the firm, the paralegals fight over who gets to support that client because they know that they'll get to use Laborless rather than, the old method. And I thought to myself, wow, I mean, I sit at home and I'm on my computer kind of answering emails or doing sales or marketing or whatever, talking to my tech team, my CTO about the product. I before that moment, I never sort of pictured, I guess I never got insight into what is the impact, like tangibly, on our users, right? No one ever, people tell us it's great, but no one ever kind of made that story kind of palpable to me. And this paralegal telling me that folks like, fight over, like, they kind of are excited to work with clients that use Laborless made me realize that somebody's emotional state at work can be, impacted by my software. I mean, that was a mind blowing experience. You realize that the work you're doing has quote unquote touches people, so that was, to me, that was really, really powerful and special. And I really, it just, yeah, it made me feel great that day. I didn't get a new business or anything. But that feedback was really special. So I think that, to me, that's positive. I try to hold on to that. And when I don't get feedback from clients, not that I need it, but I try to envision that still, because you need the positives to keep you going, when things are challenging, especially like right now with immigration, etc.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where whether I was on immigration teams or talent acquisition teams, you get reward when you able to extend an offer to someone, you made their day, they're excited to join a company. And then it's even at another level when you work with someone that is an immigrant going through the visa process, playing by all the rules that maybe some of the people that challenge immigration policy sometimes forget. Like these are the employees that are playing by the rules, following regulations, doing things by the book, literally. And I've had people reach out to me, saying, Jay, you helped make my American dream come true. My kids were born in this other country and now they're going to school here, and they're in I've had people stop by my desk and give me gifts when they've gone to their home country during the holidays or vacations, whether it's food or souvenirs, and not just me, other team members, on the team as well. Because one of those things where you just relate going, I'm not an immigrant. I'm married to one. I totally get it. I'm friends with a lot of immigrants. I have family members that are immigrants. So it really puts things in perspective, and it really challenges your own status quo going, you might feel tired one day, like, okay, I want to call it a day. And you're like, no, I got to work just as hard as, so and so, because they're just really challenging you to do better. On the technology side with Laborless, what role do you see AI helping with Laborless? Do you see that being embedded into the software somehow? Is it already there?
Yeah, it's a great question. When we say AI, probably it's generative AI, which is, you click a button and it like prints something for you, or types something out, generates an image or a document. We haven't used AI yet. I mean, we're working on a couple of things, and the reason is that we didn't want to say AI for the sake of AI. I mean, every venture capitalists are throwing money still at AI companies, and everyone's saying we've got AI this, we've got AI that. And the last thing I want to do is sort of, overpromise or just like jump onto the hype if there's no need.
Right.
I'm not trying to do a short-term sales push by saying we've got AI and then a million people like the post and then they go and try the product. They're like, yeah, it's not, okay, there's like a tiny little bit of something, but they're envisioning this everything being done for them. And so I think the expectation of the user, the psychological state of a potential user is more important to me than jumping onto a trend. And I think being honest with what a software needs is more important than just jumping onto that trend. So for us, yeah, again, we're playing with a couple things with AI. There's a few documents that our clients have said, hey, it'd be really cool if we could have this document generated, and AI is definitely good enough to generate those documents. Not everyone will use it, but it's good to have an option, right? Like you're drafting an email and Gmail might say, hey, click this button, we'll draft it for you. Sometimes you'll say, sure, if it's appropriate. And other times you're like, no, this is really important or whatever, and I'm going to draft it myself. So there are a couple of things we're working on. Honestly, for us, expansion is really going into more detailed aspects of the H-1B compliance process. A lot of people look at the LCA process as, okay, printing and posting something, that's digital. Great. Public access file, that's digital. But there's so much more. For example, you have to notify the beneficiary. You have to send them their LCA notice to acknowledge, and you have to have that receipt of the LCA acknowledgement in the folder, in their file. So we built a feature that allows you to send the form and they open it and automatically acknowledge it. It's just one little step, but it's a required step, and it's something that now Laborless does. No other platform does this, as far as I know. Now, there's a couple other things. What about companies that hire folks and they work in a part of a union rather? Then the regulations are slightly different. You don't have to actually post it at the workplace. You have to send the LCA notice to a union rep, right? That's slightly different. That's certainly not done by other platforms, to my knowledge. That's something we're working on now. A couple other things. So we want to really go so deep into this LCA compliance process because we know that the deeper we go, really the bigger the moat is between us and our competitors. And that takes more time than adding a little widget that says, hey, let's draft a document for you. I mean, we could roll that out tomorrow, but we just don't want to do it because it's just kind of plopping things onto the screen to see what sticks rather than like, what do our clients actually need? So yeah, it's a great question because it's something we talk about all the time as AI is, the topic of conversation today. But I think we've made the sort of somewhat challenging, but I think ultimately mature decision to do the thing that we think is best for the product, even if the hype around AI is like at an all time.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think you and I both know there's companies that just add the word AI in the front of their name or back of their name, and all of a sudden their valuation skyrockets. Or a social platform, acquires their own AI platform for valuation reasons. So it just happened. I mean, if you just add, if I add AI backstage pass with the HR Rockstar, I'll probably get more eyeballs just on SEO searches.
All right. That's right.
But having that laser focus as a business owner, product owner, I think is what's going to keep things going. It's okay to grow little at a time, that whole learning to walk before you run a marathon mindset. Question for you as an immigration attorney with your experience and now someone working in tech with immigration professionals, law firms, the government, HR teams, small, medium, large businesses. What is one thing you wish people understood about immigration law or tech?
I think it depends on who I'm talking to. The thing that's most relevant for me is the thought process of law firms. This is purely from a business growth standpoint, but when I hear law firms tell me, we think this is a great idea and we can see the value, but we don't have clients asking us for it. I actually wrote a post about this the other day. What can I tell them? I can't force a law firm to try our software, but my feedback to them is always, look, if your client who is an HR team, an employer is coming to you and telling you, hey, you should really be using this software because we've heard about it and we think that it would be better, beneficial to our work together, it's a little bit too late because that means the company, your client, has learned about the software, looked into it and thought about it, reflected on their current process with you, the immigration lawyer, and decided that your current process is outdated and that this technology could help. And so sure, I mean, we've had that happen where law firms come to us and like, hey, our client is asking for this, and we sign up yesterday? And we said, of course. We say sure. Like, we actually even get them onboarded before we fill out, before they pay us, before we do the contract, because I want to support them first and foremost. I'm not worried that they're not going to pay us. It's just I'd rather them go to their law firm tomorrow and say, hey, we're good to go, right? And to keep that business. But like, I hate doing that, right? And I hate them being in that situation. And just the whole thing has a sense of like urgency and catching up. Whereas the reality is, if you're a law firm, I think if you want to continue to retain talent, clients, and keep them happy, I think you should always be, even if it's a little bit at a time, you should always be showing them that you're not just, a really good lawyer, but you're also thinking about the customer service. Are you investing into tools and processes, maybe people, to make your support of their immigration needs as good as possible? And so I think that's where I think like what I wish lawyers, immigration lawyers what I wish they would know about technology and I guess just the business of immigration law in general is that it is an industry, it is a business. There are companies out there that are always thinking about how to make it better, genuinely. They're not there to, you know, commit highway robbery and sell you some nonsense and then run off into the sunset. I can tell you from firsthand experience, there is not that kind of money in the immigration industry. If lawyers aren't, making tens of millions of dollars a year, I can promise you that the people that sell to lawyers are also not, making insane amounts of money. This is a labor of love down the supply chain, from the HR people at the company to the lawyers that support them to all of the different companies that support immigration law firms. And I think sometimes lawyers forget about that and they're penny pinching because they think it's going to be beneficial to them in the long run and they don't want to try new things, et cetera. And so, yeah, to me, that's like the biggest, takeaway that I really would wish immigration lawyers and law firms would have, which is invest in yourself. You'll feel better about it. It'll help your clients. And ultimately, the value that you gain, right, by investing in yourself actually is pushed up the chain as well, right? Your clients are happier. And if they're happier, they can support the immigrants better. And just, it's a win-win situation. So it's a long answer, but it's specific to immigration lawyers.
Can you tell me about GMI Rocket and how did it come to be? And what is GMI Rocket to Laborless?
Yeah, and I'll do it briefly because this could be a whole nother episode. But
Sure, we could do a
basically,
part two someday.
well, basically, I mean, look, like I said earlier, Laborless was an idea that I had, and it was something that was met with a bit of skepticism in the beginning. It's also a bootstrap business. Myself and my CTO were partners, and we built this with our own sweat equity, as they say. I needed to sell the business in the beginning, meaning I needed to like get clients. I wasn't spending hundreds or thousands of dollars on Facebook ads or Google ads or whatever. And my thought process was, well, I should go on LinkedIn because that's where, business professionals are, et cetera, and start creating content to get the word out. And as a side note, I have a background in theater and I have a background in writing. So I wrote for a magazine for about a decade. About mostly it was what's it called? Intellectual property law, and as it relates to videographers, because the magazine was called Video Maker Magazine. And the idea was, I started actually as a college intern. And then I did it all throughout law school. And even after I graduated, I had a full-time job and I was still writing articles for them. I loved doing it. And I thought, it could never hurt me to continue to practice writing, especially because I had editorial staff. And so they'd give me feedback and I'd become a better writer. And so I took that and I married it with my decade of improv experience where I, learned how to be a bit more creative, et cetera. And I thought, let me create content around immigration compliance, which is like objectively one of the most boring topics you can ever write about, and make it a little bit more fun, just make it a little bit more approachable somehow, it's not that like I made fun of it, but just the way I wrote, I tried to make it easier to read, simple vocabulary, maybe insert some jokes here and there, even though the topic of conversation is like, how many H-1Bs were filed last year? I mean, that sounds pretty straightforward and boring. How can I make this fun so people actually read it? Why? I want people to stay on the page, to not just learn about the thing I'm talking about, but get to the point where I say, hey, here's what Laborless is about, right? That you want your readers to get to that point to educate them about your product. But you can't start up top with that because nobody will read a blog that says, hey, here's a sales pitch about my product. Boom, they're out of that page, right? This is just, content marketing 101. And I think, I guess I was pretty good at it, right? I enjoyed the writing. In the beginning, you have plenty of time and no clients. So you can spend all the time in the world on marketing. And I was, writing content, and I had a few folks reach out to me from the industry saying, "Hey, Roman, I like your blogs. Do you know anybody who can help me do the same?" And again, I had no money, no clients. We were still really launching this thing. So I raised my hand and I was like, "Sure, I'll help you out." And I just started writing one article here, a little bit of content there, and over the course of about a year and a half, when I basically just invoiced people through my personal email address, I was like, huh, I think this might be a market. I mean, people in the immigration mobility industry need marketing help, and they go to marketing agencies, and those people have no idea what an RMC is, what an assignee is, what an H-1B visa. They just, none of this stuff makes sense. And so these clients, these immigration law firms and tech companies and mobility firms end up sort of spending more time educating the people they're paying to do the marketing for them than they would if they did their own marketing. And so I came along and said, I get all this stuff. I don't need you to give me any background. Just give me what talks, have some ideas, and boom, I'm going to give you content. And it just took off from there. So, for me, GMI Rocket, GMI stands for Global Mobility and Immigration. And the whole idea behind it was it's kind of a marketing agency to help immigration law firms, but also immigration tech companies, global mobility suppliers, and tech companies to help them grow through digital marketing. And the last thing I'd note is that this is kind of my playground, right? So the Laborless is a tech company. We have one thing, we do it well, and that's how we make our money. GMI Rocket, I've put on conferences. I just had a tennis retreat where we played tennis with fellow immigration mobility folks, and we had some sessions and discussions throughout the couple of days that we were there. I've done comedy shows at conferences that are immigration conferences. I need a business to facilitate all this through, right? I have to get sponsors, I have to pay vendors, all this stuff. So GMI Rocket is like my playground where, yes, I do marketing for companies, but I also get to experiment. I have my own podcast, right? So I get to experiment with this kind of stuff. So I absolutely love it. It's nice to have a secondary business where you could just like do whatever creative things come to mind within the industry, of course, and experiment that way.
That's great. Yeah. Now I just need to figure out how to get an invite to one of those conferences or tennis retreats and, finally share a meal together, and it'll be great.
Invite's always there, Jay. I promise you. Well, the
That's
conferences
awesome.
are tough. The conferences are tough because a lot of them are the immigration law conferences, but the mobility
Right.
conferences that I've been to and the relocation conferences. I mean, I'm sure you've been to plenty of those too. Yeah, I would love to. Hey, come to New York.
What have you learned about yourself through building a startup? And is there any advice you would have for people thinking about making a pivot in their career?
I mean, there are a million things I can share, but I think the most important thing that I can impart on anybody, if there's one piece of wisdom or takeaway, would be it's a two-part thing. Number one, believe in yourself and your idea. And number two, just stay around. I mean, the number of business opportunities I've had that came out of conversations from 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago astounds me. And the reality is, if I gave up on the business, I would never see those opportunities come to be. But I stuck around despite high years or months, low years or months, and continued to put myself out there, continued to believe that what I do brings value. And again, eventually the people who you've been friends with and you've just been chatting with them and there's nothing you could offer them. I mean, there's nothing you could do with each other, but business wise, suddenly they get promoted to director of immigration somewhere, right? And they're like, "Hey, Roman, I just checked. This happened to me about a year and a half ago." And this person said, "Hey, Roman, I just got promoted to, and now I oversee all of immigration, including H-1Bs. And let me tell you, I was looking at the compliance process and it is a mess." So there was no sales process there. Like we knew each other, and they trusted me. And of course, there's a demo. You have to make sure everything fits, but I didn't have to sort of emotionally convince that person to trust me and to trust the product. And they're a wonderful client. I have a great relationship with this person. We still chat personally. We also chat obviously professionally, and that was purely a function of staying around, just hanging around. So I think for anybody who wants to get started with a business, really think long and hard about what that business is. And then when you decide on it, stake your ground. I don't know what the right term is, like really dig your heels in, right? And trust that that value will be there. It is there, and that it will be there, and just do what you can no matter what just to keep the business afloat. I would even say to the extent of, like, let's say your business is really starting off slow. Maybe you've left your job because you thought it would be faster, and now you're thinking, well, crap, I can't cover my bills or whatever. Get another job, whatever you need to do, but keep that business. If you believe in it, keep that business afloat. Do it on the side. Do it in evenings, weekends, etc. Give it time to permeate the industry and permeate the, for lack of a better word, hearts and minds of, our the people who you're trying to serve. Because eventually, if there is value there, it will come to fruition. And then you'll be in a great place to say, all right, now I'm leaving my job again, but it's not for a crazy idea. It is for something that actually exists and brings value.
I think what you shared is a great example of relationship building without an ulterior motive. You meet people and maybe they'd be interested in my product, but at the end of the day, we're all human. We want to enjoy a nice dinner together or, see each other at a conference, engage online with different things here and there. And then, yeah, maybe, like you said, 2 or 3 years later, someone pivots in their career and then they reach out to you and say, hey, and like you said, building those relationships over time versus if it was transactional 3 years earlier and you're like, well, I pitched this to Jay and he said no, and I never talked to him again versus like, or any number of other examples like that. So that leads me to one of my final questions for you is how can folks get in touch with you, connect with you, and learn more about Laborless if they're interested, if they're a law firm, an HR team, or they just want to connect with you to learn, more on the tech side of things? What's the best way people to reach out to you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, LinkedIn is number one. I love LinkedIn. I'm on it all day. I probably will respond to a LinkedIn message before an email. So Roman Zelichenko on LinkedIn, I'm the only one so far with that name. So you can find me and follow me or send me a connection request. That's the best option. Obviously, if people are interested in Laborless, the company's website, laborless.io. So spelled labor less, as the name entails. I wanted people to work less, but on Department of Labor stuff. It was a fun name to put together. Yeah, I'm open to talking to people. I'll give people advice. I mean, the number one thing that I really love is, look, if they want to use the business, great. But I actually get a ton of joy of connecting people with each other. So the more people I talk to, and I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, like you said, just chatting, building relationships. But then then a law firm reaches out to me and says, "Hey, Roman, do you know anybody who's a paralegal that may be looking for a new job?" And I think, oh, I actually just chatted with a paralegal a couple of weeks ago, and they said, they asked me in private if I know of any opportunities because either they got let go or they're looking around or whatever. And then I can make that introduction and it's like wonderful, right? So if you're interested in Laborless or GMI Rocket, of course, let's talk. But even if you're not and you're in the industry, and you're open to new connections, let's chat and if we can ever be of value to one another, or like you said, have dinner or just play tennis together or whatever it might be, I think there's beauty in building friendships in the industry that we work in.
I agree 1,000%. So now we're going to jump into the Encore section because I always like to do this with all my guests because it helps keep the human in human resources. So if you were to share your Spotify or Apple Music playlist or whatever platform you enjoy, what artists would we find?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so great question. I either listen to a few podcasts religiously, or I put on playlists and completely am ignorant as to who is playing. So I've been listening to this funk jazz playlist because it's just been like the perfect balance of high energy but a little bit chill during the workday. I've probably listened to it, dozens and dozens of hours, this playlist, so it loops over and over again. Ask me one artist, no idea. No idea. So that one's hard for me. During my Spotify Wrapped, it'll say like you were the top 0.01% of listeners for this artist, and I'm like, I have no idea who this artist is, but they looped on my playlist over and over and over again. And so, yeah, it's a weird relationship with music. I love it so much, and I listen to music all day. But because Spotify curates these great playlists, I've actually kind of tuned out from some of the artists that I really actually do enjoy. But from a podcast perspective, a few that I listen to religiously are How I Built This by Guy Raz, really great podcast. Anyone who, yeah, so from a business standpoint, it's wonderful, but he's just and his team, they're great storytellers. One that's a bit longer, but I drive up from New York City to upstate New York, and it's about a 2.5 hour drive. So I've gotten into another podcast called Acquired, and their episodes can go from 2 hours to like 4 and multi-part 4 hour episodes. But this team, these guys, Brad and I forgot their names actually. So see, there you go. I listened to it and in one ear and out the other, but they do an incredible job digging into the backstories of really amazing founders and businesses. Even though they don't have them on as guests, they do an incredible job of really bringing to life their stories. And then they get to sort of this idea of the company getting acquired or sold, and then they kind of rate the business. So really wonderful podcast if you care about business. So those are two of my favorites right now.
Nice. Yeah, I like Acquired as well. And I think the one episode I listened to was on Howard Schultz and Starbucks.
Mhm.
And they did it's almost like a case study or like a condensed like master class, in grad school on a business or a product, like you said, being acquired. One on my list is that exact one, Acquired, but it's about the company Epic and eye chart for healthcare. And it's
They
how it's
just
a
that
dominant.
just came out. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw how long it was ago. Well, I'll do that over the weekend.
Yeah, and I'm excited for that one because Epic Systems is a company that most people don't know of unless they work in the healthcare industry. It is privately owned, female entrepreneur, billionaire. They have this like incredible campus. I forgot where they're based. They're in the upper Midwest, near you, give or plus or minus a couple of states. I don't remember exactly where it is, but they apparently like their campus is like a Google campus. Like they have, places where you can play. They have this apparently massive underground auditorium that fits like the 10,000 multiple tens of thousands of employees. It is an insane company. I mean, nobody knows about it. So I'm really excited to listen to it too. Had the same thought. It was really long. I'm like, I need multiple trips for this.
Do you ever see yourself one day pitching your Laborless on a show like Shark Tank or Dragon's Den, and then seeing yourself on How I Built This with Guy Raz?
I mean, I would love to. I think the immigration space is a bit small, so I think most of these shows wouldn't be interested. I'm just being honest. I mean, I love the business, but yeah, I mean, definitely, if the opportunity was there, I would 100% do it. It'd be a ton of fun.
What was the last show, concert, event, even a play that you attended? I mean, you're right there in New York City. There's, something going on multiple nights. You could probably just, throw a stone and, find something to do any night of the week. Is there anything maybe that jumps out at you, something you might have done?
Yeah, I mean, the last like really show that I kind of high quality. I mean, okay, so one of the big last shows I saw was Aida, which is an opera at the Metropolitan Opera, and that was just lovely. And it was interesting because it's an older opera, but they had sort of this new twist on it. I mean, I won't get into all the details, but I love going to the opera. I don't go too often, but it's a really fun medium. I think not enough younger people go, and I think opera is like epic. And I think anybody who enjoys music or especially musicals, like operas are just musicals on steroids in a sense. So there's that. But most recently I went to a comedy show that was actually a startup. This is more relevant. It was a startup pitch comedy show. So there were startup founders like super early on pitching their product to the audience. And in the audience, the person who put on the show, in the audience were some comics and also a couple of investors and like tech people. And the idea was that they would ask questions back, like on Shark Tank, but also roast the founder, like about their idea or about their answer, like in a sort of stand-up comedy way. Super clever, like really, really fun. I got to learn about a couple of very interesting companies, and the jokes it's hard. I mean, it's improvised. You have to listen to what this person is saying and like somehow riff off of it, make fun of them or whatever. And I really love the idea. I love the concept. So that was super fun.
That's awesome. Since you're a tech guy, what app you cannot live without?
Ooh. Oh my
Probably
gosh.
one.
So many.
An email app doesn't count.
Yeah, email doesn't count. I mean, for me right now, it would be LinkedIn for sure. I could stripe away everything else and just, strip away the AI tools that I use, strip away the word processing tools I use, whatever. But for me, LinkedIn has been the most important thing in my business to build relationships, broadcast what I'm doing, obviously learn about other people's products, connect with people and be on their podcast, invite them to my podcast. I mean, it is number one for me by far. Yeah.
What is a guilty pleasure of yours, whether it's a food, TV show,
Ooh.
anything that
Honestly,
comes to mind?
I don't know if I'd call this a pleasure, and I hate to say it, but right now I've been scrolling on Instagram more than I'd care to admit. Thankfully, mostly it's tennis clips and stand-up comedy clips, so I actually enjoy them. And because I'm putting on this comedy show at the ALA conference this year, and in Denver in 2025, so I've come across some comedians on through my scrolling hours who have so I justify it to myself that it's productive. I also play a lot of tennis, and I'm like, well, if I learn a thing or two from these, but then it's like 3 hours, 4 hours a day is insane. And so that is just, and I don't know that that's a guilty pleasure. I think that's just an addiction that a lot of us have, unfortunately. But yeah, I'm here to admit that I do it. Yep.
It sounds healthier than doom scrolling, though. At least it's something that you enjoy,
Yeah.
tennis, comedy, so forth, versus going down, negative rabbit holes. So
I would never. I would. I never let myself. I did it for a little bit just because there was a lot more kind of happening and on my news feed, and then I just unfollowed very quickly. Because
yeah,
I mean, you do. I mean, the anxiety spikes, the nervousness spikes. But even if you're watching stuff that's, I mean, you're still staring at a flashlight basically that's beaming light into your eyes from a foot away for hours and not blinking as often as you should. I mean, it's just not good for you. So
right.
I'd rather eat a pint of ice cream like in one sitting and not look at my phone. I think that'd be healthier. But it is what it
You might
is,
be onto something there because they're saying, cell phones are the new smoking,
Totally,
essentially.
100%, 100%. So yeah, that's probably it. But otherwise, the regular stuff. I'll have my ice cream. I'll have my pizza. I'll have a beer. Whatever it is. I love it. That's life, man. It's part of life is enjoying things. So.
You have to enjoy. What is a fun or unique fact that many people may not know about you?
Well, one thing, I mean, I kind of mentioned it before that I did comedy for about 10 years, improv comedy, and I love it. I mean, I was not into theater at all when I was a kid. My elementary school forced everyone into it. The last thing I wanted to do was be on stage and have people look at me. And now I just fell in love with theater and I fell in love with the format of improv comedy. So I don't talk about it too much. Some people know about it, but man, if I could quit everything and do like theater every day professionally, and make a decent salary in New York City, I think I would, or act or something. But I just not practical, so it is what it is.
And last question: what is the last show that you binge watched on one of the streaming platforms like Netflix or HBO, Apple TV?
The 3-part docuseries about Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Oh, what's that on?
So good on Netflix.
It's on
It's
Netflix.
on Netflix. I mean, the biggest show I watched recently was Game of Thrones because I never watched it when it was like live. People told me over, you got to watch it. And I just decided, you know what? And I binged. I mean, I've never done this before. And I was walking around talking in the voice of different people on the show because I would watch 2 or 3 hours a day. But that's obviously a commitment. The Arnold Schwarzenegger one is, I grew up watching him. I was a little bit, when I was a kid, he was already past his like bodybuilding prime. And I was into weightlifting, exercising, but I didn't care that much. But I watched a ton of his movies. I mean, from the action movies, the Terminators, obviously, to the comedies, Kindergarten Cop, Twins. I mean, he's just so good. He's so funny. And then obviously he became the governor of California, and I never paid attention. I mean, it was in California, and so this Netflix documentary goes through his life, and it's really good. I mean, it touches on a couple of things. I'm sure there's more drama and things that people don't love about him that is just left out. But honestly, I have found that documentaries now are overly depressing. It's always like, here's how this company is stealing from you. Here's how this government is screwing you over. Here's how this food is actually bad for you. Everything is super depressing. And this was a documentary series that, yes, there are dramatic ups and downs, but overall, it was like celebrating his life and career. And he is epic. So I highly recommend it.
I mean, those classic movies like Commando from the
Oh,
80s. My brother and I will text each other lines from that movie or just little gifs or something because it is hilarious. And I even want to show my son, he's a teenager, and I showed him little clips. He's like, Dad, this looks like one of the worst movies ever made.
but the clips, sit him down for the whole thing. Maybe his
Yeah.
mind will change.
Well, I think because he saw like there were actual mannequins as soldiers in one of the battlefield scenes, and I was like, "Oh, that is pretty bad. That's low budget."
I know, but listen, like the best one, I don't remember what movie this was. I have to look it up. I don't know if this is when he was playing in the Batman movies when he played Iceman. I don't think that was, or I'm sorry, Mr. Freeze. I think it was something else, but there's one movie where he stabbed somebody with a huge icicle, and then he says, I think he said something like "cool down" or like "cool off" or
Yeah,
something like
yeah,
that
I remember that.
or something. And I'm like, this is just only Arnold can pull this off and somebody die of laughter because it's so cheesy. But because it's him, it's hilarious. So yeah, like sure, the movies are not the greatest quality, but he steals the show every time. So yeah, highly recommended. And since you like him, if you have Netflix, it's 1 hour per episode, 3 episodes. You'll really like it.
Roman, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your story. It truly is inspiring. And this is a great example of just, connecting on LinkedIn a number of years ago, always giving each other, a digital high five when things pop up and just really cheering each other on. We still have never met in person. I'm sure that's going to change at some point in the future.
I hope so. Definitely.
If you found value in this episode, please like, subscribe, and share, and keep rocking HR excellence.